In 476 AD, a teenage emperor sat in Ravenna with one of the most dangerous titles in the world, Emperor of the Western Roman Empire. On paper, that title carried the weight of centuries: Caesar, Augustus, legions, roads, law, the city that had once ruled the Mediterranean, the empire that had stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, from the cold edge of the Rhine to the deserts of North Africa. By 476, the title was almost empty. The emperor was called Romulus Augustulus. Even his name sounded like a cruel joke. Romulus like the legendary founder of Rome, Augustus like the first emperor, Augustulus the little Augustus. He was young, he was weak. He had been placed on the throne by his father, a military commander named Orestes. And when another commander named Odoacer marched against him, the final scene was almost shockingly quiet. No last stand in the forum, no heroic defense of the city, no great Roman army dying under the eagle standards. Odoacer removed the boy from power, spared his life, and sent the imperial insignia east to Constantinople. That was supposed to be the end of Rome. Pay attention to what continued. The Roman Senate continued. Roman officials continued. Roman law continued. Roman taxes continued. The cities of Italy did not wake up the next morning speaking a new language. The people who had called themselves Roman did not suddenly become medieval. The man who ended the Western Roman Empire had served inside the Roman military system. The senators who accepted him were Roman. The emperor who still claimed supreme legitimacy ruled from Constantinople and considered himself Roman. And the new king of Italy used the Roman machine because the Roman machine still had value. So here is the real question. What if Rome had already been replaced from the inside before the last Western emperor disappeared? This is the story of an empire that kept its symbols after it lost its power. An army that changed identity before the borders collapsed. An elite class that survived by changing masters. And a final emperor who was less the cause of Rome's fall than the proof that the fall had already happened. Rome was replaced before it fell. To understand how that happened, do not start in 476. By then, the ending had already been written. Start earlier when the Roman Empire was still enormous, still feared, still wealthy, and already becoming difficult to operate. At its height, the empire functioned as a system larger than any normal country. It moved grain across seas, it collected taxes from provinces thousands of miles apart. It recruited soldiers from frontiers most Romans would never see. It minted coins, appointed governors, built roads, punished rebels, settled disputes, and told people from Britain to Egypt that they lived under one imperial order. That was the genius of Rome. That was also the pressure point. The empire could survive bad emperors. It could survive defeats. It could survive plague, inflation, civil war, and invasion. It had done all of that before. Every survival strategy made the system more complex. More soldiers required more taxes. More borders required more commanders. More commanders created more chances for civil war. More taxes required more bureaucracy. More bureaucracy required more cooperation from local elites. The Roman state became expensive because survival was expensive. In the late 3rd century, after decades of crisis, Emperor Diocletian tried to save the empire by rebuilding the machine. He reorganized provinces, expanded administration, strengthened tax collection, and tied the needs of the army more directly to the productive capacity of land and people. It worked. The empire stabilized. The borders held more firmly. The state gained better tools for extracting what it needed. The army could be fed, officials could be paid, supplies could be tracked. The cost was a state that needed constant extraction to keep moving. Think about that for a second. If the army protects the tax base, and the tax base pays the army, then losing provinces damages the machine that protects the remaining territory. Every lost province makes the army harder to pay. Every unpaid army becomes a political threat. Every commander with troops becomes a possible kingmaker. That cycle did not instantly destroy Rome. It slowly changed what Rome was. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the Roman army was no longer a simple image of Italian legionaries marching out from the capital. That version of Rome had been gone for a long time. The army was imperial, provincial, frontier-based, mixed, adaptive, and increasingly dependent on men whose identity did not fit cleanly into old Roman categories. Some were born inside the empire. Some came from beyond the frontier. Some served under treaty arrangements. Some were settled on Roman land in exchange for military service. Some fought as allies one year and enemies the next. Rome called many of these allied peoples foederati, from the Latin idea of treaty. This detail matters. The usual story says barbarians invaded Rome. That is true, and it is incomplete. Rome also invited them, hired them, settled them, armed them, promoted them, and then feared them. The border was a marketplace of soldiers, hostages, marriages, bribes, land deals, and emergency bargains. Once that becomes normal, the question changes. Who is Roman? Is a soldier Roman because he serves the emperor? Because he speaks Latin? Because he receives Roman pay? Because he fights under Roman command? Because he lives inside Roman territory? Because a Roman official says he is useful this year? The late empire never answered that question cleanly. It could not. It needed too many people. This did not mean the army became useless. The late Roman army could still fight. It could still win. The Eastern Empire, which also used foreign and allied soldiers, survived for centuries. The deeper problem in the West was political control. An army that depends on powerful commanders can defend an empire. It can also auction the empire. That is what makes the 5th century so dangerous. The Western court became weaker while its generals became essential. Stilicho, Aetius, Ricimer, Orestes, Odoacer. Again and again, real power gathered around men who controlled soldiers, not around emperors who wore purple. The emperor became a symbol that generals used, and symbols are powerful until people stop needing them. In 410, Rome itself was sacked by the Visigoths under Alaric. The psychological shock was enormous. For centuries, Rome had been more than a city. It was an idea. When enemy forces entered it, many people felt that the world had cracked. Even then, the empire continued. That detail matters. Rome could be sacked and still continue. The capital had already shifted. The imperial court in the west often operated from places like Ravenna, safer behind marshes and walls. The empire was no longer identical with the city of Rome. The city could bleed while the bureaucracy kept writing documents. Then came the Vandals. They crossed into North Africa and took one of the most valuable regions of the Western Empire. This was devastating because North Africa supplied grain, revenue, shipping, cities, and tax capacity. Losing it weakened the West's ability to pay soldiers and maintain authority. Again, the pattern repeats. Lose revenue, lose soldiers, lose control, make bargains, empower commanders, lose more revenue. By the time Odoacer appears, the Western Empire has already been narrowed, hollowed, and militarized. Emperors rise and fall quickly. Provinces act independently or fall under successor powers. The Eastern Emperor remains the senior source of Roman legitimacy. The West still has Roman titles with less and less Roman force behind them. This is where the story becomes almost absurd. The final Western Emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was not recognized everywhere as fully legitimate. His father, Orestes, had put him on the throne after pushing aside Julius Nepos, who still had backing from the Eastern Emperor. So when Odoacer removed Romulus, he was removing a boy emperor from a throne already tangled in military politics. Then Odoacer did something revealing. He did not declare himself Emperor of the West. He sent the imperial insignia to Constantinople and ruled Italy as king, while seeking recognition within the Roman political world. The message was practical. Italy did not need a separate Western emperor anymore. One emperor in the East was enough. That is how a new ruler behaves when he wants legitimacy. Odoacer needed Rome. He needed its Senate, its officials, its habits of rule, its tax machinery, its language of authority. He could command soldiers, but soldiers alone do not govern fields, courts, ports, grain shipments, bishops, cities, and aristocratic estates. So the Roman machine kept operating under new ownership. This is the part most collapse stories miss. For many people in Italy, the end of the Western Empire may not have felt like the end of the world. A farmer still owed dues. A bishop still negotiated power. A landowner still protected estates. A scribe still wrote in Latin. A senator still cared about rank. A tax collector still came with records. A soldier still wanted land or pay. The face at the top changed. The system adapted. That does not mean nothing changed. The change was more dangerous because it was gradual. The old empire became something else while continuing to use Roman language. After Odoacer came Theodoric, the Ostrogothic king, who took Italy with Eastern approval and eventually killed Odoacer. Theodoric's rule makes the replacement even clearer. He was a Gothic king and he governed Italy through Roman structures, worked with Roman elites, and presented himself as a restorer of order. The Roman aristocracy negotiated survival. This is how empires often die. They die when the old institutions keep their names while serving a new power. Rome had become a costume that different rulers could wear. The Senate continued, but it was no longer the center of a Mediterranean superpower. Roman offices continued, while their authority depended on kings and Eastern emperors. Roman law continued, while the political world around it changed. Roman identity continued, while it no longer guaranteed rule from the Western imperial court. And across the Mediterranean, the East survived. This is the final proof that Rome fell is too simple. The Eastern Empire did not call itself Byzantine. Its people understood themselves as Roman. Its emperor ruled from Constantinople. Its armies, laws, taxes, diplomacy, and religion carried Roman imperial identity forward for centuries. So, what ended in 476? Not Rome as an idea, not Roman law, not Roman people, not Roman imperial ambition, not even the Roman Empire as a whole, if you are standing in Constantinople. What ended was the ability of the Western imperial court to pretend it still controlled the West. That is why the title Fall can mislead you. It makes you imagine a clean moment, a collapse, a final crash. The real story is more uncomfortable. Rome's Western Empire was replaced piece by piece before anyone removed the final emperor. The army was replaced by bargaining networks of Roman and non-Roman power. The tax base was replaced by local survival. The emperor was replaced by generals. The provinces were replaced by kingdoms. The old center was replaced by Ravenna, then by rulers who kept Roman tools while obeying different political realities. By 476, the corpse was already cold. Odoacer only closed its eyes. That is why Rome's ending still matters. Collapse does not always announce itself with flames. Sometimes the uniforms remain. The offices remain. The ceremonies remain. The paperwork remains. The language remains. The power underneath moves somewhere else. Rome was inherited by people who understood its value. They kept the tools, kept the symbols, kept the prestige, and used them for a different world. That is the real story of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Rome was replaced before it fell. If you found this version of Rome's fall useful, subscribe. More history documentaries are coming, and the next one will follow another empire, object, or idea that changed the world in a way most people never notice.